Well, hey, good morning. You're gonna have to put up with a wiggly camera today because my tripod is, the battery's dead. So I'm holding it with my hand. I'm trying to be still, but it's probably gonna get all funky on you. Hey, there's my doctor. So it's good to have you here. It's Easter, week number 3, talking Road to Emmaus. 2 disciples walking with Jesus, but they don't know it's Jesus for hours and hours and hours until they sit down at a table with him, break bread, and their eyes are open, they see him, and then poof, he's gone. So we're going to be talking about some of the stuff going on in that passage and what it might mean for us today. So enjoy the journey. I'll see you in a minute. Well, as a teenager, my church only taught one perspective on an idea or theology. And I honestly didn't even know there were other perspectives on certain theologies until college. Like, you would think that possibly they would have said, well, other denominations believe, and like insert any theological thought here, but they're just wrong, and here's why. Nope, they didn't even say that. They didn't even recognize it. So when I took theology classes in college, it was like walls were falling down around me, and I realized I was living in a theological broom closet within this cathedral of historic belief. Now, one day after class that really stretched a lot of our brains, I noticed 2 other students in a heated debate about like the 2 sides of the issue presented. But in the class, these 2 students didn't even know that these issues like existed. And now here they are like arguing about something that they just learned about literally like 3 minutes ago. I don't know what it is, but we just love to argue and debate. And to a point, it can help. Like, it can help us grasp a belief better. But when we start weaponizing our ideas, things get a little rough. But how can we do it in a healthy way? Now, our passage today actually starts with a healthy kind of debate. 2 disciples are walking along the road to Emmaus on the day of the resurrection. This is Easter day, well, evening. And Jerusalem is winding down after this real high like Passover, as well as the uproar of Holy Week and all the stuff that happened from the triumphal entry to the public trial of Jesus to the execution via crucifixion, and now these rumors of Christ's resurrection. Like, they got a lot to talk about. And it says that they're talking and discussing, which is a double verb usage, like 2. And the word for talking is the same word we get homily from. You know, like a short little sermon is a homily. So here they are processing ideas to each other, but the word discussing means to investigate together. So they propose an idea in the talking or homily section, and then they discuss it and investigate it together. And this is how we make meaning together. Like, we feel safe to throw an idea out there without being ridiculed, but also our value as a person is not tied to the idea being right and correct. And we can talk about things. We can investigate ideas together. We're open to being wrong. We're open to learning from one another. We're open to teaching one another. But when we make a weapon out of our idea, it becomes an ideal with an L on the end. And then we make a meme out of it, a t-shirt out of it, a slogan out of it. Right? Like, armies in ancient times would gather under banners and flags, especially when they had to regroup from a battle for a second wave of attack. Now, our ideals can become similar to banners in warfare. We gather those people who agree with us to our side under this ideal. We adopt like apocalyptic language to sway those who are not sure which banner to gather under. Right? If you don't promote this idea, it's the end of our people, our nation, our church, our political party, our world, whatever. Right? And we can then become very abusive, manipulative, and dangerous. Now, the 2 disciples obviously love Jesus. They're moved by his story and disturbed by his death. But it is possible that they adopted Jesus as the mascot for their ideal of gaining political power, which we still do that. Using God as a means to gain worldly power, to exercise your will upon the world, is not Christian, even if it's perceived as having Christian ends. That is actually called oppression. The resurrection is not about swapping out oppressors with Christian ones. It's a different kind of power. Best said by Howard Thurman. Power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. You see, it's about a non-violent resistance to oppression that desires the redemption of the oppressor as well as the oppressed, because our salvation as a people is bound up with one another. All right, I gotta make a confession. I have a hard time finding things. I will tear apart a cabinet looking for a bag of chips I know is in there, but I cannot see it. So I go looking in places that certain teenagers in my house may have left it, still can't find it. So then I come back to the cabinet, and when I speak the words, "Hey, where is the," and no sooner than when the word leaves my mouth, my eyes are opened and I see the very thing that I couldn't find mere seconds before. I don't know what it is about that phrase, but without fail, every time, as soon as I say those words, I see it. It was right in front of me the entire time. Now it says that the two disciples' eyes are prevented from seeing the stranger on the road with them as the very Christ they have been talking about since before he joined them. And that sentence alone is a sermon in itself. So we got to unpack that, right? They're walking along talking about the events that took place over the last week during Passover. The excitement that they felt, wondering if Jesus would really be the one to, quote, redeem Israel, which is code word for leading a military rebellion against Rome and establishing themselves as the global superpower with the other nations as their slaves and servants. Okay, then this stranger comes near, which is a theological code word again for a theophany, which is just a fancy way to say that they had a close encounter with God, just like in the Old Testament, when a messenger of the Lord came, or God actually visited. Those are called theophanies. And they're having a theophany, but they don't see that God has come near because they have too solid a definition of what that's supposed to look like. Namely, success, power, control, dominance, comforts, all that stuff. God was supposed to come near and give those things. Now they don't have those things, and so where is God? Well, he's right next to them. So here they are, talking about Jesus to Jesus, whom they don't recognize as Jesus, because Jesus is supposed to be doing something else entirely. And when you only know God by the grand expectations you place upon God, you miss where God actually is, this present moment. Christian writer, theologian, and mystic Evelyn Underhill said, God is to be found in the details of our lives, in the routines and the everyday, as much as in the great moments of revelation. Now the two disciples are shocked that Jesus is not caught up in the news of Jerusalem that everyone else is talking about. And today it feels the same, like everyone needs a hot take on the topics that someone else handed to you and told you was the most important thing in the entire universe. And we're addicted to commentary skewed for our perspective so that we never actually have to have an opinion that is ours. We merely have to spout off whatever our favorite commentators are saying about the hot topic. But what if instead of ingesting opinions and parroting them back out into the world, we actually walked with those we have opinions about to hear their story? What if instead of debating issues, we had hospitable conversations with the people that those issues actually affected and touched? What if we could humble ourselves and learn from others? In the midst of our busy lives, we often miss the presence of God in the present moment. We become fixated upon our own expectations and definitions of what God ought to be doing. Just like these two disciples on the road to Emmaus. And as Thomas Merton once said, we are so obsessed with doing that we have no time and imagination left for being. We must learn to let go of our preconceived notions and open our eyes to the divine presence that surrounds us at all times, even permeating the oxygen we breathe. See, God is not only found in the grand moments of revelation, but also in the details of our everyday lives. And we must be willing to listen to the stories of others and have hospitable conversations that allow us to learn from them. So let us be open to the unexpected ways that God may be revealed to us, and let us embrace the present moment with all of its complexities and messiness and uncertainties, because that's where God is. What would you do if somebody called you stupid? It kind of happens in today's passage, but not so offensive. These two disciples just said the phrase, "We were hoping that Jesus would be the one to redeem Israel." Again, that was the catchphrase for the whole concept of the Messiah defeating Rome and establishing Israel as the global superpower with all other nations as slaves to them. That was the expectation many people held on to. And then the passage says, also, this is what they said, also, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. And some of us who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But they didn't see him. Interesting. Well, Jesus' response is, "You are foolish and slow of heart." Dang, Jesus. Like, a modern phrase for foolish might be, "You guys just don't get it." And it's not meant to be an insult, like we would throw around the word stupid. It's more of an observation. They cannot interpret the situation right in front of them correctly. And then Jesus tells them why they can't see. They still don't know he's Jesus. They still think he's the stranger on the road. He uses the phrase slow of heart. What does that even mean? Like, in the Greek culture of the first century, the heart was often seen as the seat of a person's thoughts, emotions, and will. And in modern times, we trade that out for our brain. We think the brain as like the mission control, like command center that we feel, that produces motivation and feeling and all that stuff. Now, was this phrase slow of heart used anywhere else in Greek culture? Actually, yes, but not in the Bible. Greek philosopher Aristotle, who lived 3 to 4 centuries before Christ, said in his work, Rhetoric, "Men are generally slow of heart to believe anything against their own interest." Now, I'm wondering if Luke was familiar with the usage of this passage and adopted it. What does it even mean? Remember, the phrase redemption of Israel refers to the desire for the nation to become a dominant global superpower, which was a common aspiration for those in this patriarchal culture. Now, if you're a man in this culture, you have a lot of vested interest in your country becoming a great power because that translates into a big bonus paycheck for you. So it was a significant driving force behind their interpretations of the scriptures. Now, this vested interest in gaining power and influence prevented them from seeing beyond their own agenda, and they were unable to recognize the Messiah walking right beside them. Now, we're supposed to contrast this. The women of this culture were not included at the table of power and wealth, and were in a better position to see what God was actually doing in a way that men could not. So Jesus takes them back to Sunday school and explains everything to them again from the beginning. And it takes all day. Now, Jesus is not handing them something new. These stories are something that they have had the entire time. But they made all of these additions and expectations and interpretations and layered it on top of the stories so that they couldn't recognize God when God showed up. Now, Meister Eckhart said, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by the process of subtraction. Now, this passage is an encouragement to examine how we partner our religious views with those things that give us power and prestige, and how this might affect our interpretations. Now, we are, as Aristotle said, slow of heart to believe anything against our own interest. But that doesn't make those things that we cling to true or good or right, even if we attach God's name to it. They're encouraged to listen to the testimony of the women, and then we, in turn, are encouraged to listen to those who might not benefit from the systems that we are caught up in, so that we can test these systems for their truth and their goodness. Now, in today's passage, Christ acts as if he's going further down the road. And the Greek word there, to act out, is actually literally to pretend. But the disciples urge him to stay with them for the night. Now remember, they still don't know that this man they've been hanging with all stinking day is Jesus. Now, Emmaus is believed to be about 7 miles west of Jerusalem, and they finally arrive here. Now, I looked at a map of the road system of the day, and there's no other city west of Emmaus until you get 30 miles down the road onto the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So why is Jesus going to fake them out like this? Like, hey guys, see ya. I'm going to try and make it 30 miles in the next 30 minutes to find safe shelter for the night. Well, possibly it's a reference to the book of Job, where there's a description of God's presence passing by, just like in our passage today. In chapter 9 of Job, it says, "Behold, God passes by me, and I see God not. God moves on, but I did not perceive God." Now, this passage suggests that Job is struggling to perceive God's presence, even though he knows that God is present in his life. Sounds a little bit familiar to our passage currently, right? The disciples still don't know Jesus is there. Now, hold on to that idea. Then Jesus reclines at a table, which is a Luke thing. He uses this verb 5 times when describing a dinner scene. The Jews of this time, they reclined at the table because God told them to do that as a way of remembering their freedom from slavery in Egypt when Moses led them out. Then they did not have a chance to sit and rest when they were enslaved. And now they're instructed to recline, relax. And Jesus here takes that traditional posture, possibly to illustrate his ultimate freedom in the resurrection. And then he breaks bread, which is the same verb used in the Last Supper, like right before his arrest, where he said, "This is my body given for you." Just that famous passage. And then he's arrested and tried and crucified. Now Christ breaks bread again in this moment and gives it to these 2 disciples. And it says that their eyes are opened and they see Jesus. Then he disappears, like poof. Now I find it interesting that the moment they see Jesus, he's taken from their sight. Now this disappearance of Jesus is often interpreted as like a symbolic of our journey of faith. You know, the walk from Jerusalem to Emmaus represents the journey of a soul towards an awakened understanding of God. The presence of Jesus with them on the journey represents the initial stages of spiritual development, where the individual is aware of the presence of God in their life, but still has a lot to learn about how they're all tangled up with intention with the powers of the world. But at a table here, which is always representative of the community, our eyes are opened to see the presence of Christ among us, in our families, in our church, in our city, in our neighborhoods. You see, when we set aside squabbling over ideas and sit down with another in vulnerability, we can actually see one another. When Jesus disappears, it's like this grand invitation to continue the journey of faith, but in trust with one another. We don't have this physical form of Christ here anymore, but we have one another. And these 2 disciples say, weren't our hearts burning within us talking with him on the road as he opened up the scriptures to us? Now, opening up the scriptures made their hearts burn, which is good. That's a good thing to do. But sitting in community is what opened their eyes to see God among them. Because you can't learn compassion by reading about it. You can't learn to love by thinking about it. You can't dissect the scriptures and find God's presence in physical paper, right? And the people that do think those things can be very dangerous because it's all an idea, and that idea has to be wielded. Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, said in that novel a powerful phrase in some of the discussion. Sometimes the Bible in the hand of one man is worse than a whiskey bottle in the hand of another. There are just some kind of men who are so busy worrying about the next world that they've never learned to live in this one. Dang, man. As Paula Darcy said, God comes to you disguised as your life. And our life consists of one another. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us here in this office space. Hi, check it out. There's my doctorate degree. Thanks for putting up with a wiggly camera. My tripod battery died, and I don't know what's going on with it. It's all just wobbly whoosh. But hey, if you enjoyed what you had here, you can partner with us by liking and following and subscribing and commenting and sharing and all the other good stuff that you can do online. And you can be partnered with us that way. And if you would like to partner with us in a financial manner, you can give. There's online instructions here on the screen. And we would be so blessed to receive your support, and that'd be awesome. So we'll see you next week for week number 4 of Easter. We're talking John 10, come to give you life, which is good news. Try it again. The Greek word to act as if is actually the